You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another book review. Today I'll be reviewing Nichomacheon Ethics by Aristotle. Now, this is the first Aristotle book I've read. It certainly won't be the last. I plan on reading Politics shortly after this, so they are typically considered to go together. Now, for this book, I listened to it on Audible, so I don't have a physical book to hold up and showcase in this. But what Nichomacheon Ethics is it essentially goes over various different parts of ethics. Now, Nicomacheus was Aristotle's father's name, so I don't know if there's a connection between Nicomacheus and Nichomacheon Ethics. I assume there is. I also don't know if I'm pronouncing Nichomacheon properly, so apologies if I'm saying it wrong. But the book covers various different parts of sort of how humans work. It outlines art, what it's required to make art, the idea of art needing to have some sort of goal to achieve a certain mean, or rather to achieve a certain end, and it defines ends, means, various other things like that. It talks about virtues, happiness as a virtue, the difference between voluntary and choice and involuntary. It covers the ideas of incontinence versus, bad, like if someone is incontinent and unable to be good, how it's different from being bad. It defines good. It tells you, virtues. It goes over the way relationships work and the way they should work and what constitutes a good relationship. Friendship because of utility, and friendship because of the idea of love. It covers many of these subjects. Again, I couldn't do it justice because I'm nowhere near as articulate as Aristotle was, so apologies on that. I definitely recommend reading it for yourself. The book itself is very matter-of-fact. You're obviously not going to get a narrative story or anything like that when you're reading this. It's very much like, the end. It very much is like, this is an end, this is a mean, these are, virtues, this is the way those virtues play out, this is incontinence, this is good, things like that. Like, it's very matter-of-fact. While reading the book, I did have to look up what the term niggardly means. It doesn't mean anything you think it means. It actually means, like, stingy. So niggardly means stingy. Because it's a term he uses quite a bit in the book when defining people who are stingy. But yeah, the book itself is a very interesting look at human nature and the motivations for why we do things and the ideal situations for how we ought to do things like that. It's very matter-of-fact, like I said. You can definitely see the seeds planted for what would later become objectivism, through Ayn Rand's writings later. Like, Ayn Rand is the mother of objectivism. I would say Aristotle is the grandfather of objectivism. Everything that Ayn Rand did was expanding upon things that Aristotle established. And then Steve Ditko continued that, so again, I think people should read Aristotle, especially if they're into Ayn Rand, to kind of see where a lot of her motivation came from, because obviously there are differences as well. But again, with a book of this nature, again, it's very matter-of-fact, so there's not a lot to talk about narratively, and I certainly couldn't do each of the individual points justice in this video, but I absolutely recommend checking it out. It's absolutely not for everyone, but I definitely think you should try to check it out if you can, because obviously it's very wordy. It's very matter-of-fact, so obviously it's not going to be the most entertaining read in the world, but it's definitely a thought-provoking read, and it really gets the gears turning in your brain as you're reading it. Or in my case, listening to it, which was the simplest way to go about it. Obviously, I could get a physical copy of it, and I probably will in the future at some point, and then read it again, because I think that it's very good to look at our nature and why we work the way we do. But that's really all I have to say about Nichomacheon Ethics. It's a very interesting read. It's very, like I said, logical and not very narrative, but it's definitely a good read if you're looking into philosophy. I think Aristotle was the greatest mind who ever lived. He was the smartest guy who ever lived. I think he's up there for sure at the very least. Anyway, that's all I really have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. This has been Fugitive Red-Eye. Have a good one. Toodles.